Are leaders born or trained? Are you a leader? What is the difference between leadership and management? Can you really develop as a leader? These are some of the questions we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to Good Work Now. I'm Dr. Brian Moffitt, your host. Good Work Now is the only show for creating and finding good work. And today we're going to talk about this elusive thing called leadership. Sometimes when we're trying to define something that is complex and elusive like leadership, it's easier to begin talking about what it's not or comparing it with something else. Let me begin by comparing leadership with management. In his book, Learning to Lead, noted leadership professor and author Warren Bennis helps us understand leadership by differentiating it from management. I will share some of his comparisons. First, the manager administers, the leader innovates. The manager maintains, the leader develops. The manager accepts reality, the leader investigates it. The manager focuses on systems and structures, the leader focuses on people. The manager relies on control, the leader inspires trust. The manager has a short-range view, the leader has a long-range perspective. The manager has his or her eye always on the bottom line. The leader has his or her eye on the horizon. The manager imitates, the leader originates. The manager accepts the status quo, the leader challenges it. And finally, the manager is the classic good soldier. The leader is his or her own person. In today's show, we will explore these ideas and focus on three questions. What is leadership? Who can be a leader? And what you can do to become a more effective leader yourself. I'm very pleased to welcome back to our show today Steve Sphar and Gail Mancarti. Steve Sphar is a leadership consultant who specializes in leadership development and helping managers make their workplaces more productive. And also is Gail Mancarti, who is an organization development consultant working with leaders wanting to learn the art of reflective leadership, strategic planning and thinking, and team development. They have been working with organizations for quite some time, and I'm so pleased that you both could be back here today to talk about leadership.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Let's start with what is it? What is leadership from your perspective? And Steve, you can start us off.
Sure. Well, I like that list that you had from Warren Bennis because it really talks about these different things that leadership is, and it was interesting how he contrasts it with management. So it is different than management, but something I also want to keep in mind here, people in leadership positions have to do both. So it's not like the management duties are bad and part of some old system that we want to get rid of.
Good point.
It's a balance of both. Okay. Leading managers, or whatever you'd want to call them, people in positions of power, have to be able to do both. Okay. But the interesting thing there is they have these dichotomies. If you're a good manager, you have to get a process down so that it's predictable and repeatable. You want tomorrow's things that you're building to be as good as yesterday's. So you have to maintain things in a way that they can be replicated. Leaders have to see what's going on the horizon and change things. Exactly. So to be a leader, you have to be keeping care that your company is doing the things that are predictable, control, and creating some amount of chaos or leading your people through the chaos. Exactly. So this discrepancy of stuff creates a paradox for people.
So folks need to have both those skills if they're in a management position or in a supervisory position or an executive position.
And it's more a matter of being able to see when to do both and what the balance is. Okay. Sometimes your people are too complacent and they need to be taken into a new direction, kicking and screaming sometimes. The change is not always welcome. And sometimes there's too much chaos and you need to be able to control things back.
Exactly. So this notion of balance seems to be key for understanding. Any thoughts, Gail, do you want to share about the notion of balance or the leadership?
Well, I think one of the important things that Steve mentioned is about people. And that when you think of a leader, you frequently think about leading people. And that's an important aspect. And so all of the qualities that it takes to have relationships with people, to lead people, to communicate with people, those are the kinds of qualities that good leaders hone and focus on. And so there's all kinds of things that we can talk about in terms of that.
Is authority required to be a leader?
I like very much this thought that leadership, maybe with a small L, is something that's available to everyone. People in any part of an organization can exhibit the qualities of leadership. They can be someone who exercises these relationship skills in a way that influences people towards the positive. Capital L leaders might be those people that are in positional authority.
Right, and so they have maybe more power tools at their disposal because they have that authority.
They have a greater span of control,
Right.
therefore a greater span of potential damage.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
They can do-
right.
And a span of potentially greater leverage for the good of the company as well. But any individual can do that as well.
Okay, I like that notion of small L, big
Yeah.
L to differentiate that. I think some folks assume I can't be a leader unless I have a position of authority, but anybody in the workplace or anybody in the community, any human being
That's right.
can be a leader.
And in fact, organizations and groups rely on formal leaders and informal leaders.
Right.
And frequently, the informal leaders are just as critical, if not more so, than the formal leaders. The formal leaders are those that are in those positions of authority that have the tools at hand that most of us think about leadership. They have the ability to direct people, the ability to
Right.
communicate, and all the resources encumbered around that. But the informal leaders are the ones that really are embedded in the workplace, what people listen to,
Exactly. They have influence.
and they influence,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, I like that a lot because people will sometimes give up their power to be able to, if they see something that needs to be changed, well, I'm not the boss, it's not my responsibility.
Right.
Well, maybe not technically, but if you see something that can make things better, you can choose to exercise that, that leadership or not. And formal leaders, if they're smart when they're trying to do some change in the organization, are going to tap those informal leaders.
Exactly.
Right.
You know what might be an interesting exercise if our viewers could sit back and think about the people in their work environment that impact them or influence them, and make a list and look at the list and see how many of those people are in official authoritative positions, like they're the boss or they're a director or a supervisor, but how many are not? How many are peers or coworkers? And so that may give folks some insight about what leadership is in their own environment. What are some of the things that leaders do? What are some of the behaviors they display, some of the activities they perform?
Well, one way to look at that would be, imagine bosses that you've had that were really super. Either direct supervisors that you had, or leaders of your company, or just leaders in general that you've admired maybe over history. Right. If you thought about, well, why is it that I admire that person? What was it that I enjoyed about working for that person? Start to make a list. Those are the sorts of attributes that leaders have. So some part of it is about credibility. Some of these people we've been talking about that are informal leaders are people that have credibility within the organization. It might be interpersonal credibility. I keep my word to you. I have values you agree with. It might be competence credibility. You know, if you give Gail a job, boy, she gets it done. And so then their voice has a greater weight. But any of the characteristics, you could just start to look at the list that you would make. They would be people who care about other people. They would be people who get results. They would be people who care about their values.
Right.
They would be people who are able to articulate a vision for where the organization needed to go and inspire other people to go there. Any of those types of things are the sorts of things leaders do. And I like doing this little exercise where people pick people they admire because then they understand it
Exactly. It's
at a
real for
personal
them.
level.
Let's talk more about vision. What is a vision? What is it? Like I hear this term mission statements and vision statements for organizations, and strong leaders are associated with creating a compelling vision for their organization. What does that mean to you? Any thoughts about compelling visions and how you make them and what they consist of?
Yeah. Do you want to
Sure.
start?
Well, vision is really something that can inspire people. It's a look ahead.
Okay.
It is the next chapter, it's the horizon, it's the new environment. There's a lot of different ways to talk about the future, but it really is having the ability, a leader has the ability to articulate the future in a way that it compels people to want to strive or reach that future. And that's a vision.
Like I remember the Kennedy's vision of putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade was a very compelling, strong, and it worked. It happened. It coalesced a whole group of people to make it happen.
It was also simple. You know, visions that are very complex or are couched in only certain terms of art for a particular industry or what have you, it doesn't really grab people. People can't remember complex visions at work, so simplicity helps a lot.
And I've seen like paragraph length vision statements, and people aren't going to be remembering those.
Unless you're Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Not many people are inspired by a paragraph or
Right,
something
right.
like that. You know, another way to look at it too is this inspiring vision that we're talking about is a direction. It's a place off in the future that does not exist today. And that is part of the allure. As a matter of fact, you might paint a vision of one that's almost unattainable. I mean, really, frankly, no one knew in 1960 whether we could get to the moon in a decade. But that was the vision that he put out there. A mission can also be inspiring, but it's the specific ways that everyone contributes. It's the purpose that a person or a unit has in getting there. And what? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, just that vision is future and mission is present. Maybe another way of looking at the two statements. Okay.
And another thing I was just going to add on vision, I really like the the work of Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. They wrote the book Leadership Challenge, and that's based on, it's going on 25 years of research they've done. I think it's the #1 selling leadership book. But anyhow, in talking about the leader's role in enrolling people, enlisting people in a vision, they talk about 4 qualities. It should be unique, ideal, image of the future. So if your vision has those 4 things, you know, it's unique. It's like, what is it that your folks
It's
can
memorable.
do? Yeah,
Right.
yeah. You're describing an ideal, future, and imagery. If it's something that evokes an image in your mind, that's what helps make it stick with people. And Kennedy's statement did that.
Exactly. What are some of the other things that leaders convey or do? What are some of the other attributes or characteristics of leaders?
Right. Well, a smart leader is going to know that they're far more powerful when they're working through others. So the extent to which they can empower other people. There's different things that people can do when they're in a management or position role. If they feel they have to come down on that balance that we said before about control, that can have a stifling effect on people.
Exactly.
So this balance is always very difficult. But the more that you can work on your scope of delegation and having the proper controls in place so you feel comfortable with the scope of delegation.
And actually, you use the word empowerment, and that you just help clarify for me what that means, delegating. So empowerment really is about delegating tasks to other folks on your team or in your organization.
I think it's sharing a level of decision-making, sharing a level of, at lower levels, input, but it's really best when people themselves are making the decisions in the work.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, another thing that popped into my mind when we were talking about vision and also in delegation, it's incredibly important, is communication.
Right.
I mean, authentically communicating and being visible and being present in your organization. People need to see their leaders. They need to hear their leaders. They need to believe their leaders.
Right.
Okay. If you can just remember those kind of 3 things. it's
So
helpful.
hiding in your office all day won't work.
No.
Won't earn you credibility
No.
among your workers.
No. And being authentic, being genuine, being real with people, being human with people. Now, there are some leaders who are quiet leaders, but when they speak powerfully. And there are other leaders who are very articulate and will paint the picture, and they will, visit lots of people and be visible every day. So it's not necessarily that we're talking about one particular style of leadership.
Right, right.
We're talking about sort of some core concepts and qualities and characteristics of which then a particular person can bring themselves to.
So you don't have to lose your personality.
No.
You can grab onto these concepts and practice some of these behaviors, but be true to who you are as a person.
That's right. That's right.
Any other qualities you can think of that are important to emphasize when we're talking about what leaders do?
Well, the stuff that you're talking about, that whole list, is going back to relational. So the test of a leader is whether or not people follow, and people won't follow you unless they have a relational connection with you.
Okay.
So the stuff you were talking about with communication, I think the most important part of communication is the listening part.
Okay.
So there's a part, we were talking earlier about enrolling people in a vision, and that's important. People need to hear from the leader that person's view of where the organization is going. But the thing that really seals people, I think, is when the leader listens. If you've ever been to a large presentation with a leader who's speaking, there are those leaders who put the emphasis on what they say, but there's another quality of leadership if you're listening after after the Q&A session, where you really know that the leader is also listening to.
Okay. To what extent should the leader involve employees in the construction of the vision, in the wording of it and the conveying of it? Should that be the leader's personal vision and they write it down and they distribute it, or should it be something that's collectively developed amongst a group?
Well, let me put this out, and I'll see if Gail agrees with me or not. Because I used to feel, and I do think the best case scenario is when you get some level of input from people. I'm come to think more in recent years that it varies very much on the circumstances. Sometimes a company is in such a turmoil, or there's been a lack of leadership at the head, and a new person comes in, and somebody needs to set the ground a little bit more quickly, either because of the turmoil and crisis, or just because circumstances have led it that way. So sometimes it's a matter of the leader putting forth their decision, saying, folks, we're going this way.
Right.
But then they still have to enroll people in it, and not too many people get enrolled into something, commit to something, if they haven't had input in it. They have to believe it in a way where they feel they've had input. So I really think the better situation is when you can do some level of pulling information from people, involving them in the process.
And may look as simple as a leader calling folks in one-on-one, or dropping by their desk and informally chatting with them and saying, I'm beginning to think about the future, about where we need to take this division or unit. What are your thoughts? So it can be as simple as a conversation.
Exactly.
And that person feels as though they've had a one-on-one time with that leader, and that there was listening that was happening.
I want to tag on to that, because you're bringing up another point too about leaders who give credit. So when the leader or leadership of an executive team or something comes out with their vision statement, the communication can be about, we've been listening to people. I've heard Joe in the fleet maintenance crew saying this, and that really struck me. And there's a way to share credit and let people know in your communication, look, I got these ideas from you.
It's like I'm not sure this is a good example for what we're talking about, but the Joe the plumber example that Senator McCain really leveraged that a lot as a way of trying to appear to connect back to the population, wider population. I've heard this term before many times, managing by walking around. I think it relates a lot, Gail, to what you're talking about in terms of visibility, and also, Steve, what you're talking about as far as enrolling. You do both at the same time. So if you're a visible leader and you wander around and you become more visible to the employees and you talk to them. Well,
the other word that comes to mind is access. You're accessible.
Right, exactly.
So you just make yourself accessible. It's the leader that goes in the corner office and closes the door that really has short tenure with the people with whom they lead. So it's really about making, and that's why you hear open door policies, but you have to really believe. The leader has to follow through. If the door is open, it really has to be open. I mean, whatever the ground rules the leader sets, the ground rules have to be kept.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, I'm really thinking, you're bringing up ideas for me in the things that you're saying about emotional intelligence. It's very easy to say, oh, be a good listener. Get up and walk around. Get input from your people. Sometimes the input you get is not great. Sometimes the input you hear, the feedback you get, is can be taken as criticism. So there's an emotional intelligence aspect of being able to self-manage your emotions and manage relationships and influencing other people that I think is really key.
I think that's a really good point, because I think the magnifying glass is on the leader. So if a leader reacts in what he or she thinks is a minimal defensive manner, it could appear to be quite stronger in the eyes of the followers or the employees. So being aware of your stuff, what happens to you when you get defensive, or you feel criticized, or if you're afraid, or if you're angry, how does that show up for you?
I think it is really critical for anyone who's in a positional power of leadership to pay attention to that, because you don't know how you come off. You almost have to go around, find some confidants in your workplace, even among your executive point, and get feedback and say, how am I coming off? Because you don't see yourself.
Exactly. And we see that over and over again, that strong leaders have that person, that confidant, that trusted feedback person that will kind of nudge them and say, you know what, you need to tone it down a little bit here, or tone it up.
Right, exactly. And there's a difference between being public and being visible and accessible, and then closing the door with that confidant and really being who you are. I mean, if you have to say certain things, don't say that in public. Say that in a special place that doesn't leak into how you carry yourself, your reputation, how you are as a leader.
So it's almost like having a personal coach in a way.
That there are many leaders, and that's the work that Steve and I do frequently. Is that as we have found out in organizations, the higher you go in organizations, in a hierarchical organization, the more isolated leaders feel, because there's fewer and fewer people that they can kind of truly let their own feelings out and kind of unwind with. And so executive coaching and leadership coaching becomes a very critical component to their success. Not just in crisis, but just ongoing.
Exactly.
It's a way to steer that feedback in a way that's really useful for the leader.
Exactly. It brings up that whole part about reflective leadership,
Yes.
which I know you folks have been doing a lot of work in.
Yes.
And actually I was able to participate in one of the sessions that Steve did, which was a huge opportunity for me, both personally and professionally. But I hear that also that strong leaders take time to reflect, to think about their day, think about their style, get the feedback from trusted sources, and weigh that, and think about changes they want to make with how they present into their organization.
I think if leaders don't take time to reflect, they just shortchange themselves. Now, at the end of the day, the leader is responsible, and again, I'm talking about the positional leader, to getting results for the company. So leaders put 99 or 100% of their energy into action, getting something done. If they don't, and I don't know what it is for each person, it differs, but if it isn't 2 or 5 or 10% of your time isn't spent in reflection, at the high level that leaders, positional leaders work at, they're missing a lot, because there's just so much information that comes at them. If they don't take a second to reflect and come back to what they're doing, it just becomes too scattered.
They might have missed something important.
It can increase blind spots.
They can also allow your intuition. I mean, if you notice, some leaders have an incredible ability to not only think through problems, but to intuit. And there's a wonderful blend, and you can actually watch leaders do that. They bring their intuition. You know, they can't really describe maybe the future, but they know it's out there. They know it's there.
If you ask most leaders what was the most important decisions, very few of them will say it was one that I really thought out. For most of them, it's some gut hunch. The intuition and nurturing that through reflection is really where most leaders will tell you their important decisions came from.
And so it's not so much the vision statement, but it's the personal vision behind the statement that seems to have the most meaning. You know? One other thing that I hear some debate about is the whole issue of expertise. That a leader needs to have the expertise of the service or the operation that they're leading in order to lead it. In other words, if you're leading a utility department with a bunch of plant operators and engineers, that you need to be a plant operator or an engineer in your background to lead that group. What are your thoughts about that issue? Do you think that if folks had these other concepts that we're talking about, that they wouldn't need to have that technical expertise, but as long as they had the leadership skills, they could lead a group?
I think it would give someone a leg up. You know, in some of the research I've seen on credibility, you know, the things that affect credibility and therefore leadership, therefore whether or not people will feel in relationship with you and follow you, are things like honesty, on being inspiring, on being forward-looking, but there's another segment of it that is around competence. So you can show your competence as a leader as being able to administrate, even if you're not in the expertise area. But if you have the subject matter expertise, I think people would feel a bond with you on that part of credibility sooner.
It has the relational element because it connects you with people.
With the engineers,
common ground,
the nurses, the doctors.
Good point.
But on the other hand, I have found that staffs will give new leaders, time to learn. If they're coming into a new subject matter area, there will be sort of a honeymoon period that they will sort of will withhold judgment until this person demonstrates that they're interested enough to learn the business. So you don't necessarily have to be in the business beforehand, but you have to at least learn the business, make the commitment to learn
the language.
At least. If not the business processes, the key issues and so forth. But also to then demonstrate to the staff that you are leading, that you are understanding the business. You are proceeding with it. You are looking out for their welfare as well as the organization. So it is a process. So there's a lot of different ways that you can handle credibility and expertise.
Let's transition now into how does one go about becoming a more effective leader, or starting in leadership for their first time. Any suggestions on ways folks can grow as a leader?
Well, Steve mentioned one already, and that is sort of getting a mentor, getting some trusted advisors to help you to maybe observe how you are and to give you some feedback regarding that. That's critical.
And that's an informal sort of assessment you can do. You can also do formal assessments.
Okay.
Literally have a 360 survey taken on yourself.
What's 360?
Oh,
There we go.
I've heard it's good.
It's where you get 360 of your enemies.
That's a different 360.
It's a type of questionnaire
Okay.
that would go out to a variety of people with questions about you and what you can do to be more effective. And it's called 360 because it takes in everybody.
Right.
You know, you would have your direct reports grade you, you'd have your peers on your level grade you, and your boss also grade you. But it's all in one written form, usually around a certain selected set of topics.
Okay. And so you get back some specific feedback about areas, leadership behaviors that you're strong in, maybe some other areas you need to sharpen.
Right, and a lot of instruments out there that are very well validated and proven, and then it's up to the leader to decide how to take the feedback and what changes to make.
Exactly. You also mentioned a couple of books, Steve. Any other books or you recommend?
Leadership Challenge is a great book. Dupre's book, The Art of Leadership, is a great book, and really anything by Warren Bennett.
Yeah. He's very strong.
On Becoming a Leader is one of his famous ones.
Okay.
Stewardship by Peter Block.
Oh, yes.
Any of
That's a
Peter
real good
Block's
one.
material. Right.
Good.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you both for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure to have you again to talk about leadership. And let me give you some contact information. If you're interested in talking to Steve or Gail some more, Steve Sphar, his website is www.stevespar.com. His phone number is 916-739-8057. And to reach Gail, her email address is gailmco@earthlink.net. Her phone number is 916-457-4852. And if you're interested in providing any feedback or input to me regarding this show or any future shows, please email me at brianmoffitt@comcast.net. Thank you very much for watching our show today on leadership, and until next time, keep up the good work.
Let's do another one.